Okay, everybody, this is the next math lesson. We are on Module 2, Lesson 8. You can see the notes in front of you. Please start writing them down. Please start copying them. It's Module 2, Lesson 8 is about reflections and translations. So you will need the page that you are writing your notes on. Get a page to copy these notes. You'll also need pages 81 through 91 of your Module 2 book. Might be easier if you rip them out. You'll also need the math tools we've been using for Module 2. You will need a transparency. Transparency will be super helpful today. You might need something straight like a ruler or just anything straight. I use a ruler sometimes. I also use the straight part of a protractor. If you want to do what I do and use multiple colors to label things, I think it's easier. You can get a bunch of different colored pens, or you can get a bunch of different colored pencils. And you should also have at least one dry erase marker. I have many colors because I like to color label and things so that you can do the work. Those are all the materials I have: my paper, my work pages, transparency, straight edges, and writing tools. All of this is ready to go. Okay, so Module 2, Lesson 8, Reflections and Translations. So far on the road so far, we've talked about the three rigid motions. Three rigid motions. We have translate, also called slide, where we use a vector. We have reflect, where we use a line of reflection. And we have to rotate or spin, where we use a point to rotate around, and degrees tells us how far to rotate. So those are the three types of rigid motions: slide, flip, and spin. We've talked about all three of these for 7 lessons so far, so you should have a pretty good idea of how to do them and how to work on them with the transparency and how to follow the rules, because we've practiced these quite a bit. Today, what we are going to do, today we are going to combine rigid motions. We're going to actually do 2 of them. Now we cannot do both at the same time, but we can do them in a certain order. So we're going to do 2 different things today. We'll do like step 1, we'll translate. And step 2, we'll reflect. Or step 1 will be reflect, and step 2 will be translate. We're going to see if the order matters. Does the order of what we do matter? So far in this module, you've just done translations, you've just done reflections, or you've just done rotations. This is the first lesson where we're going to do 2 of them. We're going to do a translation and then a reflection, or we're going to do a reflection and then a translation. 2 of them. So it's very important you pay attention to what order we do them in, and it's also very important you pay attention to how we do it. You need to pay super close attention and be very precise with what you are doing. Okay, so these are our notes for today. Just a little bit of a review of what we've done so far and a preview of what we'll be doing today. Let's do some practical practice. Let's put the pen to the paper, and let's try this out. So go to page 81 of your textbook. Page 81 should look like this. You have a whole bunch of figures that have been reflected and translated. You have a few things. So let's just look and talk about what we have. We have the original image. This right here is the original. This is figure A on your paper. This is the original image. figure A. Now you can see a couple things happened to figure A. You can see that it was reflected to make this figure on the other side of the line. It was reflected over the line. So it flipped over the line. And then somebody also translated it down. Followed this translation down. So the original is in black. The reflection of the original is in green. The translation is in red. So it was reflected. There was a reflection, and there was a translation. Reflections in green, translate is in red. Now we're supposed to use this for exercises 1 through 3, which are on page 82. So keep page 81 next to you while we look at page 82, because page 82 has 3 questions. Number 1 says, figure A was translated along vector BA. So the vector they used was BA, resulting in the translation of figure A. So that's telling us what we already know. That first sentence just says, figure A was translated following vector BA. So it followed this vector over here. This is vector BA. So it followed that vector when it got translated. So it started here, it translated down here. That's all the first sentence said. The next part, the question part, is describe a sequence of translations that would map figure A back onto its original position. So that is basically asking us, how do we move it back? So it was translated. How do we move it back? So if you look at this, figure A followed BA to make A prime. How do we move A prime back? Think about it for a second. Write your answer down for number 1. What do you think? How do we move A prime back to A? In other words, what vector do we follow? What vector do we follow to move A prime back to A? And this answer comes from lesson 7, which was the last lesson we did. You should remember from lesson 7 that, well, if we used BA to move it this way, we should just follow the opposite vector to move it back. So what's the opposite vector of BA? The opposite vector is AB, going back. So we go that way on the vector. We went this way to move it. To move it back, we go the opposite way. So the answer is, how do we move it back? We use vector. That's the vector symbol. It's an arrow. And we use vector AB. Notice I put the arrow next to the B because when we move it back, the arrow is pointing to the B. This is how we write vector AB. Vector AB will map A prime back to A. AB will move this back here. The backwards vector moves it back. Hopefully everybody's following along. You got all that. Let's look at number 2. And let's see what they're telling us about number 2. Figure A was reflected. So this time it was reflected across line L. So that's the rule, line L. Resulting in reflection of figure A. So that first sentence is just telling us the original A was reflected to make, I'm going to call this A prime prime. So it reflected over line L. It flipped, like, watch my hand, it flipped over. It flipped over. So this flipped to make that. That's all the first sentence tells us. Now it says, describe reflections that would map the figure back to the original. So in other words, how do we make A prime prime go back over here? How do we move it back? Think about for a second, how do you think we move it back? Write down what you think, and then we'll talk about it together to see if you are right. How do we move it back? How do we move A prime prime back over here? Hopefully you thought about it, you looked at it and you said, well, if it flipped this way to move over here, then to move it back, we just flip back. We flipped this way. If we flip again, it moves it back. So to move it back, we need a reflection over line L will move A prime prime back to A. Another reflection, and remember, you have to say, oh, you have to tell me the line when you tell me a reflection. A reflection over line L will move A prime prime back. So if we flip this again, it will move back. So there's one big idea they want you to learn with numbers 1 and 2. They want you to learn that a translation can move another translation back. A translation can reverse a translation. And for number 2, a reflection can reverse a reflection. So they can both fit, you can move them back and forth. You just translate and reflect. So that's the big idea. You can undo these transformations. You can undo them. They just want you to know how to undo them, and that's what we're practicing. For number 3, it's asking, can translation BA, can vector BA undo vector DC? So it's asking, can BA undo DC? Why or why not? Well, let's look at our figures again. So they're asking us to pretend we take vector A and we follow this vector DC. Let's pretend this figure moves on that vector. Can BA undo that change? If we use this vector to translate figure A, can BA move it back? Why or why not? Well, you should see, well, let's try it. Let's try it. I'm going to take my transparency. I'm going to copy my vector. You can do this with me if you want, or you can just watch. And I'm going to copy, and I'm going to trace my figure. Now let's say I translate on vector DC. So I slide it following vector DC, and that's where that's where figure A goes. Does it look, just looking at this, does it look like BA will move this back? If I follow BA, I'm sliding this way. That's not moving it back where it was. Following BA does not fix it and move it back. To move it back, I have to go backwards with CD. BA will not help me fix it. So now you need to put that into words so that we can understand. So the question was asking, can BA undo DC? And the answer is no. But it's not good enough just to write no. You have to tell me why or why not. So why can't this work? Well, the answer is because the vectors move in different directions. And they need to move in opposite directions. To reverse translations. If you want to reverse translations, if you want to go backwards with your translations, you need to move in the opposite direction. Vector AB and DC do not move in opposite directions. You can see this goes in that direction, this goes, that's not opposite directions. It only works if you go in opposite directions. So hopefully you can see that, you can understand that, and you're ready to move on to page 83. So now we're ready to kind of practice these a little bit more with our transparencies and actual translations and reflections. Let's go to page 83, which the top looks kind of like that, but I'm going to slide it down a little bit so we can actually see the figures, see the vectors, and everything we need to see. So those are the figures we have. It looks like we have a little wedge shape. I'm guessing that's the thing we're going to move around. We have a line. That line tells me we're going to probably have to reflect and flip over that line. And we have vector AB, which tells me that we are probably going to translate that direction. Now, that's what I can guess. I don't know what they want me to do until I read the directions. I need to read the directions to know exactly what I'm supposed to do. So let's look at number 4. Number 4 says, let there be a translation along vector AB. So translate with vector AB. That's the first thing we have to do. And then a reflection across line L. That's step 2. You can even look at this where it says, use a transparency to perform the following sequence. So the translation comes first, and then the reflection comes second. What we're testing for this, and you can even look at number 5. Number 5 says the exact same thing, except if you look, number 5 says, use a transparency to form the following sequence. It says, reflect first, then translate. So number 4 and 5 are switching the order. For number 4, we want to translate first and then reflect. For number 5, we're going to reflect and then translate. So make a prediction right now, just in your own mind. You can write it down if you want. Is the order we do things going to matter? Will it make a difference what order we do this? Will this shape be in a different place if we translate and then reflect versus if we reflect and then translate? So is the order important? Make a prediction. And then we're going to actually work on this. So predict, will the order matter? Will the order matter? Well, let's try it. Let's just test it. We are going to need our transparency. So one thing I'm going to do that you've seen me do before in previous lessons, I'm going to make my vector longer. I'm going to extend my vector with my ruler to kind of make sure I stay going in the same direction. So I'm going to make my pink dot, my famous pink dotted line you've seen before in other lessons, to help me go the right direction with this. So let's do number 4 first. Number 4 says translate and then reflect. So let's do this. Let me get my transparency, and you can do it with me. I'm going to label everything on my transparency. I'm going to get my vector. My vector is AB, so I'm going to trace it precisely. That's my vector. I also want the figure that I am going to translate and reflect, the wedge. I'm going to do that in a red color right now. Being precise. I am also going to trace the line of reflection. So let me trace the line so that I have everything traced and I'm ready to go. There we go. Everything is traced. Everything is good. I'm ready to be super precise with this. So the first thing that they said was, let's translate. For number 4, translate was first. So let's slide on AB first. And I'm following my pink dotted line to make sure I stay the same direction. And I stop exactly when I moved one vector away. So I translated. I did step 1. But I'm not done yet because step 2 says to reflect. Step 2 says to reflect over the line. So now I need to trace the line again to reflect over it. So I'm going to flip over, because I translated, the line is in a different spot. So let's do this one more time just to show you again. This is the setup. Step 1 down at the bottom says to translate. So I follow vector AB and I translate. Step 2, reflect, which means flip. So I need to flip over the green line. So I'm actually going to pick the transparency up and flip it over. I'm actually going to pretend it's stuck on the green line, and I'm going to flip it over the green line. And when I flip over the green line, it's going to land on the same, it's going to land right about there. So here's our figure. If you notice, I have to make the bottom of the green line and the black line line up when I flip over. So watch me flip over. And then I line up the line. See how the green and the black are, I'm flipped over, and the green and the black are lined up at the bottom. That's where I know I'm flipped over in the exact right spot. Now, I need to label where the figure stopped. So this, I'm going to sneak under the transparency, and I'm going to label, kind of sneaking my pen under the paper where it stopped. And I'm going to connect my lines so that I can see exactly what the figure looks like after it stopped. So that is what happened. So watch what I did again. I'm going to do all the steps again. This is where I started. Step 1 was translate down here. So I slide down. I stop right there. Step 2 was reflect. Flip the paper over. Make sure the green line lines up perfectly. And that is where the figure stops. After I translate and reflect, it stops here. Now, number 4 tells us to label the image S prime. So I'm going to take this, and that is S prime. Now I'm ready to do it again for number 5, except for remember the difference for number 5 is I'm going to reflect first and then translate. So let's get this all set up. I'm going to erase some things that I don't need right now. So I'm going to erase everything and just start over again for number 5, just to keep it a little bit simpler. Now I'm going to reflect first. So this time I need my line of reflection. And I'm going to make sure I go all the way to the bottom of the line to make sure it's precise. And I need my figure S that I am reflecting. So there's my figure. And this time it says, number 5 says reflect first, and not translate first, reflect first. So with me, let's reflect and flip our transparencies over. And after you reflect, that's what it should look like right there. The figure moved. Now, after we reflect, step 2 is translate with AB. So I need AB this time. So let me trace a vector AB. And let me slide my paper. Let me slide down in the direction I'm following my pink line. And that is where I stop because it's at the very end of the vector. Now I reflected and I translated. I need to sneak under my paper and I need to label the new location. So with me, this takes some practice, this takes some work, but that's okay. It takes a little bit of patience, takes a little bit of time, but you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. Sneaking under the paper and labeling it the best you can. Then I'm going to use my straight edge to finish the wedge. And this is where I stop, all the way over here. So this I'm supposed to label. It says label the image S prime prime. So this is S prime prime. So I hope you followed all of those steps with me, and you can see what the difference is. So with S prime, we did the translation first. We followed the vector. And then we flipped, and we stopped here. For S prime prime, we flipped first, and then we translated. So you can see that for these two figures, for S prime and S prime prime, the order made a very big difference. I mean, I could even get my ruler out, and I could say, these images are 14 centimeters apart. That's a 14-centimeter difference. All because of the order you translated and reflected. When you translated first, you stopped here. When you reflected first, you stopped here. So they're trying to teach you that the order you do these things in is super important. You could end up on the opposite side if you're not paying attention to what order, if you're not being precise and paying super close attention. Hopefully you were paying super close attention and your paper looks almost exact. It should look almost exactly like mine. So we have this thing where we learned that order is important. Translating and reflecting, the order is important. Let's look at page 84, and I'm actually going to say it's okay not to do page 84 today because they're asking us to do the exact same thing we just did, and we're just making our own figures. So we're going to skip page 84 so we can go straight to the lesson summary on page 85. It says what we learned today, that a reflection and then another reflection will move it back, which you already know. A reflection and then another reflection puts it back where it started. And then a reflection followed by a translation does not move it back, whereas there's a translation followed by a reflection. So the lesson summary is how to reverse. This was about reverse transformations and how to move things back. And the second part of the lesson basically summarizing order is important. You can write those down if you like. You do not need to write them down if you can remember those on your own. But let's look at the next page. That's our lesson summary. Exit ticket is on page 87. Take the exit ticket and put it in the back of the packet because the exit ticket is what we're going to work on last. And then on page 89, you will see the homework helper, which is another example. They give you the same another figure, and they ask you to reflect and translate in the different orders. And they actually show you the answers on page 90. So they show you what happens if you reflect, if you translate and then reflect, you get this one. If you reflect and then translate, you get that one. So you can see this is just more emphasis that the order is important. Always pay attention to what order they're asking you to do things. So that's the homework helper. If you want to practice a little bit more, you can do that. But let's look at the problem set. Problem set number 1 is a lot of words. So let me explain it to you and maybe summarize it for you so you know what you're doing. Problem set says, let there be a reflection across line L and let there be a translation along vector AB as shown. So we have a reflection and we have a translation. You can see that because there's a line right here. That's a line for your reflection, and that is a vector for your translation. If S is the black figure, so S is this, I don't know, I look at this as maybe it's a guy with 2 arms and no legs, but whatever that is, that's what we're working with. It says it wants you to compare both ways to do it. So what you need to do is you're going to do this 2 times. You're going to work with this guy 2 times. The first time, it wants you to translate first, then reflect, and then you're going to do it again, except for this time you're going to reverse the order. You're going to reflect, then you're going to translate. So you're going to notice again, this is another practice, is another exercise where you prove that order is important. So you're going to translate, then reflect, you're going to reflect, then translate, and then you're going to see what the differences are with our little legless man right there. How does the legless man change when you change the order of things? For number 2, it says you have parallel lines, L1 and L2, and you're going to reflect. So you're going to reflect L1 and L2. So what you're going to do is you're going to flip L1 over L2, and then you're going to flip L2 over L1. So this is a fun little reflection activity. So what they ask, what they suggest is they say, just put a point somewhere on L1. Just put a point somewhere on L1. And then you're going to do this twice again. Take that point, and then you're going to reflect over L1, and then you'll reflect over L2. Then you're going to do it again, only you're going to switch the order. You're going to start, reflect over L2, and then reflect over L1. So this point is going to be flipped back and forth, back and forth. They just want you to see, again, that order is important. If you reflect over L1, if you reflect the point over L1, what happens? And then you reflect over L2. So just flip the point back and forth and see if these orders matter. And then number 3, let L1 and L2 be parallel lines. Let reflection 1 and reflection 2 be the reflections across L1 and L2. You know what? Just skip number 3. You're doing that. It's the same thing as number 2. It's just asking for the ideas. So you do not have to do number 3. Just do numbers 1 and 2, where you are checking to see how important order is for these. And I will post my answers to number 1 and 2. I will do the work, and I will post my answers. You can check my answers following the Google Classroom link, and you can see how your work compares. After you check your work on the problem set, you are ready to work on the exit ticket. And if you look at the exit ticket, it is a big paragraph, but you get a lot of freedom to work on this. You just get to pick what you do. So just follow it step by step. First step is draw a figure A, which means you can draw whatever figure you want. You want to do a star, you want to do a circle, you want to do a box. If you want to do a little legless person, you can. And then you're also supposed to draw a line of reflection and label it L. And you are supposed to draw a vector FG. So you get to make your own figure, your own line of reflection, and your own vector in the big empty space. And then it wants you to do exactly what we did in the lesson. So you're going to draw the 3 things. Step 1, draw the 3 figures, your figure, your line, and your vector. Draw 3, the figure, the line, and the vector. And then you're going to switch the order. You're going to take your figure, you're going to reflect, then translate, and then your third step is going to be translate, then reflect. So it's exactly what we did in the lesson. You are doing the options in different orders. You're doing the options in different orders. So all you have, so you're going to, except for this time, you get to pick where the line is, where the vector goes, and what shape your figure is. You get to pick those. So it's a little artistic challenge and a little bit mathematical challenge all rolled together. So you're just going to show me how the order matters with what you did. And remember to take a picture of your exit ticket, turn it in onto the Google Classroom so that I can check it and make sure that you know order is important and that you can prove that order is important with these transformations. So that is the end of the lesson. We talked about the exit ticket. You have some examples for you. You can check my work on the problem set as soon as it's posted on the classroom. So that is the end of the lesson. If there are any questions, please reach out to me, and I will do the best I can to answer the questions and help you.